The most famous psychology experiment ever conducted was built on a lie. For over 50 years, the story of the Stanford prison experiment served as a simple, terrifying fable. It told us that a monster lurks inside every ordinary person, waiting for permission to emerge. The truth is more complex and far more relevant to your own life. By the end of this, you'll understand the real mechanism that turns good people into perpetrators of cruelty. And you'll see how the same invisible system that created those guards is operating in your workplace, your social groups, and your life right now. It began with a classified ad in a Palo Alto newspaper. Male college students needed for psychological study of prison life. $15 per day for 1 to 2 weeks. 75 men applied. 24 were chosen. They were the most normal, healthy, and psychologically stable of the group. A coin flip decided their fate. Half became prisoners, half became guards. The study was set to run for 2 weeks in a makeshift prison built in the basement of Stanford University's psychology department. On a quiet Sunday morning, the experiment began. Real Palo Alto police officers showed up at the prisoners' homes, arresting them for armed robbery. They were searched, handcuffed, and driven to the prison in the back of a police car. There, they were stripped, deloused with a spray, and forced to wear a thin smock with no underwear. A number was their new name. A chain was locked around one ankle. The process was designed for maximum humiliation and de-individuation. The guards wore khaki uniforms and reflective sunglasses, making eye contact impossible. They were given billy clubs they couldn't use, but which served as a constant symbol of their authority. In the beginning, it was awkward. The students felt foolish playing their roles. The guards issued clumsy commands. The prisoners smirked back. It felt like a high school play with a flimsy set. The first day passed without much incident, but then, on the morning of day 2, the prisoners rebelled. They barricaded their cell doors with their beds and ripped their numbers off their smocks. The game was over. What happened next? Nobody was prepared for. The guards saw the rebellion as a genuine challenge to their authority. They called in reinforcements, sprayed a fire extinguisher into the cells, and broke down the doors. They stripped the prisoners naked, took their beds, and put the ringleaders into solitary confinement, a small, dark closet. This moment was the pivot. The guards, on their own initiative, escalated the situation from a game to a power struggle, and they began to innovate new forms of psychological punishment. They started using push-ups as a penalty for minor infractions. One guard would step on a prisoner's back while the others counted. They forced prisoners to clean toilets with their bare hands. They woke them in the middle of the night for head counts, called counts, that lasted for hours. The guards would use these counts to berate and humiliate the prisoners, forcing them to repeat their numbers endlessly. They created a privileged cell for inmates who behaved, giving them their beds back and better food. This simple tactic shattered the prisoners' solidarity. They began to turn on each other, viewing one another as competition for the guards' favor. Within just 36 hours, the first prisoner had a full-blown psychological breakdown. Prisoner number 8612 began screaming, crying, and raging uncontrollably. The psychologists initially thought he was faking it to get released. He was one of the rebellion's ringleaders. They offered him a deal to become an informant, but he refused, screaming, "You can't leave! You can't quit!" He had become so immersed in the role that he believed it was a real prison. He had forgotten his own identity. The researchers eventually had to release him. You have to wonder, where were the good guards? Half the guards were there. Why did none of them intervene? The lead researcher, Philip Zimbardo, noted that while only about a third of the guards became actively sadistic, none of the others ever stepped in. They never missed a shift. They never told the aggressive guards to back off. They were complicit through their silence. The social pressure to conform to the group was immense. Being a good guard meant being a tough guard. To challenge that was to risk being ostracized by the other guards. So they said nothing. The experiment was supposed to last 14 days. It was stopped after 6. The reason for its early termination is perhaps the most revealing part of the whole story. It wasn't stopped because of Zimbardo's own ethical concerns. He was playing a role too, the prison superintendent. He was so deep inside the experiment that he had lost his perspective as an objective scientist. He saw the prisoner's suffering as a sign that his experiment was working. But then, an outsider arrived. His girlfriend, a fellow psychologist named Christina Masloch, came to conduct interviews. When she saw the prisoners being marched to the toilet, bags over their heads, legs chained together, she was horrified. She told Zimbardo, "What you are doing to those boys is a terrible thing." It was that outside voice, that moral challenge from someone who wasn't part of the system, that finally broke the spell. Zimbardo ended the study the next day. For decades, this was the story we told. A story about the power of the situation to overwhelm individual morality. A chilling demonstration that you or I could become a monster under the right circumstances. It was a clean, powerful narrative, and it was mostly wrong. In recent years, a deeper analysis of Zimbardo's own archives, including previously unheard audio recordings, has shattered the original interpretation. The guards didn't just naturally descend into tyranny, they were guided. The recordings reveal a crucial orientation session the day before the experiment began. Zimbardo's research assistant told the guards, "We can create a sense of frustration. We can create a sense of fear in them. We're going to take away their individuality in various ways. They will have a sense of powerlessness." This wasn't a neutral observation of what might happen. This was a direct instruction. The guards were being told what results the experiment was supposed to produce. They were given a mission. One guard, David Jaffe, who became known for his John Wayne persona, later admitted he was consciously modeling his behavior on a cruel character from a film. He thought he was giving the researchers what they wanted. He believed he was helping the experiment succeed. The guards weren't just passively falling into a role. They were actively working to fulfill the perceived demands of the authority figure, Zimbardo. This makes the experiment's conclusion far more disturbing. The lesson is about our startling obedience to authority, even when that authority asks us to do harm. It shows how easily people can commit acts of cruelty when they believe it's for a greater good, like the advancement of science. They were just following orders. This reframing explains events far beyond a university basement. It provides a blueprint for understanding some of history's darkest chapters. Think of the abuses at Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. The official narrative blamed a few bad apples, a handful of rogue soldiers. The photos shocked the world. American soldiers smiling over pyramids of naked, hooded Iraqi prisoners. But the parallels to the Stanford experiment are impossible to ignore. You had young, ordinary people put in a position of absolute power over a dehumanized group. They were given vague instructions from their superiors to soften up detainees for interrogation. They operated with little oversight in a high-stress environment, and a powerful in-group culture quickly formed. The soldiers weren't all psychopaths. They were people operating within a system that implicitly and sometimes explicitly sanctioned abuse. The system created the behavior. The bad apples were grown in a poisoned orchard. This dynamic is everywhere, operating in subtler forms. Consider the Wells Fargo account fraud scandal that came to light in 2016. Thousands of bank employees secretly opened millions of unauthorized accounts in the names of their customers. Were all these employees inherently corrupt? The evidence suggests otherwise. They were responding to an impossible internal system. Management had imposed extreme sales quotas, demanding employees open numerous new accounts for every customer. Meeting these quotas was the only way to keep your job and earn a bonus. Failing meant public humiliation and termination. So, good people, under immense pressure from a corrupting system, did unethical things to survive. They weren't trying to be evil. They were trying to be good employees according to the rules of the game they were forced to play. The true insight of Stanford is about the architecture of systems. Power corrupts because systems are often designed to reward behavior that erodes empathy. When you are given a role, a uniform, a title, and a set of incentives, your personal morality can become secondary to fulfilling the expectations of that role. Your focus shifts from, is this right? To, am I doing this correctly? To resist requires a level of moral clarity and social courage that most of us overestimate our ability to possess. So how do you fight back against a system designed to corrupt you? The answer lies with the two heroes of the Stanford story. The first was Christina Maslach, the outsider who could see the moral horror, because she was never part of the system. She hadn't been desensitized. This highlights the critical importance of maintaining an outside perspective. We need people in our lives who are not in our company, our industry, or our social bubble, who can look at our behavior and ask, why are you doing that? They are our ethical alarm systems. The second hero was a guard named John Mark. He was one of the few who quit the experiment early on. He felt sickened by the abuse he witnessed and refused to participate. He broke the powerful conformity of the group at great social cost. The other guards saw him as weak, a failed guard, but he was the only one who succeeded as a human being. Resisting a corrupt system often means being seen as a failure by the standards of that system. It requires you to choose your own definition of success over the one the group provides. The Stanford prison experiment is a flawed study, yet its true lesson is more vital than ever. It teaches us that evil is often mundane. It's the product of systems that dehumanize some and grant unaccountable power to others. It's the result of good people trying to succeed within broken rules. The most dangerous prisons are the ones we build for ourselves through the roles we play and the expectations we silently agree to meet. The bars are invisible, made of social pressure and quiet conformity, and we are all both the prisoners and the guards. The ballot box is always open. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you are and the kind of world you are building. The real question the experiment forces us to ask is what happens when the system itself is rigging the election? And that systemic blindness explains exactly why so many modern institutions seem to break the people who try to fix them, which exposes a completely different and far more insidious psychological trap.